She was eating while a human whispered her something that made her blushing. The Stellar Relations Complex cafeteria hummed with its usual midday activity as Lyra Winters absently stirred her synthetic coffee. Her translator tablet lay beside her half-eaten lunch, displaying the latest updates to the Meridian diplomatic protocol. As the complex's lead linguistic specialist, she prided herself on mastering the subtleties of interspecies communication, but the Meridian's language still challenged her with its intricate contextual shifts. A movement caught her eye as Nyx-Ray, the newly appointed Meridian diplomatic attaché, gracefully settled at a nearby table. Unlike many of her species, Nyx-Ray preferred solitude during meals, her iridescent scales shifting in subtle patterns that Lyra had learned indicated contemplation. The Meridian's 4 fingers delicately held what appeared to be a traditional dish from her homeworld, crystalline structures that dissolved slowly in a purple liquid. Lyra found herself captivated by the way Nyx-Ray's antennas swayed gently as she ate, each movement precise and deliberate. The Meridian's large, almond-shaped eyes seemed to hold ancient wisdom, despite her relatively young age of 42 stellar cycles. Though they had exchanged only professional courtesies since Nyx-Ray's arrival 3 weeks ago, Lyra felt drawn to learn more about her. Taking a deep breath, Lyra gathered her courage. She had spent countless hours studying Meridian customs, and perhaps this was the perfect opportunity to practice. Standing with her tablet, she approached Nyx-Ray's table with what she hoped was an appropriately respectful posture. "May I join you?" Lyra asked in carefully practiced Meridian, her voice modulating to match the formal tones used in diplomatic settings. Nyx-Ray's antenna twitched in surprise, but her expression remained composed as she gestured to the empty chair. "Your pronunciation is exceptional," she replied in standard English, her voice carrying a melodic quality that reminded Lyra of wind chimes. "Thank you," Lyra smiled, switching back to English. "I've been studying your language extensively. The way it adapts to social context is fascinating." "Many find it overwhelming," Nyx-Ray admitted, her scales rippling with what Lyra interpreted as amusement. "Even some of my own people struggle with the more archaic forms." Their conversation flowed naturally, touching on the differences between their cultures. Lyra found herself enchanted by Nyx-Ray's perspective on human customs, particularly their habit of using metaphors in diplomatic speech. In turn, Nyx-Ray seemed genuinely interested in Lyra's linguistic research. As their lunch break drew to a close, Lyra decided to attempt a traditional Meridian farewell phrase she had discovered in her studies. She carefully pronounced the words, "Sholveth nx ora me." The effect was instantaneous and unexpected. Nyx-Ray's scales flushed a deep violet, her antenna freezing in place as her large eyes widened. The crystalline food structure she held slipped from her fingers, landing with a soft splash in its purple liquid. I should go," Nyx-Ray stammered, rising quickly from her seat. Her usual grace momentarily abandoned her as she gathered her things, her scales still pulsing with that remarkable violet hue. Lyra sat frozen, mentally reviewing the phrase she had used. According to her research, it had been a formal expression of gratitude for shared time. But clearly, she had missed something crucial in the translation. "Did I say something wrong?" she called after Nyx-Ray's retreating form, but the Meridian diplomat had already disappeared through the cafeteria doors, leaving behind only a lingering scent of something like jasmine and stardust. Later that afternoon, Lyra buried herself in her linguistic databases, trying to understand her mistake. It wasn't until she cross-referenced historical contexts that she discovered her error. In certain situations, particularly during shared meals, the phrase she had used carried intimate undertones, roughly translating to, "My heart beats in rhythm with our shared breath." Lyra felt her own cheeks flush as she realized the implications. She had essentially delivered a poetic declaration of romantic interest to one of the complex's most important diplomatic representatives. Yet, as she recalled Nyx-Ray's reaction, not anger or offense, but something closer to flustered surprise, she felt a flutter of hope in her chest. Perhaps, she thought, some mistakes were worth making. As she prepared for tomorrow's diplomatic briefing, where she would inevitably see Nyx-Ray again, Lyra found herself looking forward to the encounter with an excitement that had nothing to do with professional development. The universe, it seemed, had an interesting way of bringing people together through misunderstandings. The morning after the cafeteria incident, Lyra arrived early to the diplomatic briefing room, her heart racing every time the door slid open. When Nix-Ray finally entered, her scales had settled into their usual pearlescent sheen, though they flickered briefly upon seeing Lyra. Rather than taking her usual seat at the front, Nix-Ray chose one near the back, her antenna curved inward in what Lyra recognized as a sign of self-consciousness. The gesture made Lyra's chest tighten with guilt, and something else she wasn't quite ready to examine. Throughout the briefing on upcoming trade negotiations, Lyra found herself stealing glances at the Meridian diplomat. Once or twice, she caught Nix-Ray doing the same, those large eyes darting away quickly when their gazes met. The tension in the room was palpable, at least to Lyra, though their colleagues seemed oblivious to it. As the meeting concluded, Lyra gathered her courage and approached Nix-Ray before she could leave. "I owe you an apology," she said softly, careful to use the most formal dialect of standard English. "I didn't fully understand the implications of what I said yesterday." Nix-Ray's antenna relaxed slightly. "There is no need for apology," she replied, her melodic voice equally quiet. "Your study of our language is admirable. Though perhaps we should discuss proper context over tea, to prevent future misunderstandings." Lyra's heart skipped. "I'd like that. The botanical garden at 1500 hours. A slight violet tinge colored Nix-Ray's scales. That would be acceptable." The botanical garden occupied the entire 32nd floor of the complex, designed to house specimens from hundreds of worlds. Lyra arrived to find Nix-Ray already waiting by the Meridian section, where luminescent flowers swayed in an artificial breeze. "These are Shalora blooms," Nix-Ray explained as Lyra approached. "They grow in the twilight zones of my homeworld." She gestured to a nearby bench, where she had set up a traditional Meridian tea service. As they settled onto the bench, Lyra noticed how the flower's soft glow played across Nix-Ray's scales, creating patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. The Meridian's movements were precise as she prepared the tea, each gesture carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "The phrase you used yesterday," Nix-Ray began, passing Lyra a delicate crystal cup, "it has several layers of meaning, depending on context." "I found that out," Lyra admitted, accepting the cup carefully. "I had only studied its formal usage in diplomatic settings. I didn't realize that sharing food changed its significance so dramatically." Nix-Ray's antenna twitched in what Lyra was beginning to recognize as amusement. "In my culture, sharing meals is intimate by nature. Words spoken over food carry greater weight. That particular phrase, when used in such a setting." She paused, scales shifting to a deeper hue. "It suggests a desire for deeper connection." "Like courtship?" Lyra asked, then immediately wished she hadn't as Nix-Ray's scales flushed violet again. "Similar, yes. Though more poetic. It speaks of souls finding harmony, of hearts beating in synchronized rhythm across the vast expanse of space." Lyra took a sip of the tea to hide her own blush, finding it surprisingly sweet with an aftertaste like starlight, if starlight had a flavor. "It's beautiful, actually. Humans have similar expressions, though maybe not quite so elegant. Would you share one?" Nix-Ray asked, her antenna leaning forward with interest. "Well." Lyra considered for a moment. "We might say something like, 'You take my breath away,' or, 'My heart skips a beat when I see you.'" Now it was her turn to flush. Though saying them out loud makes them sound rather simple compared to Meridian poetry. "Not simple," Nix-Ray corrected gently. "Direct. There is beauty in directness too." She set her cup down, her movements deliberately slow. "Lyra, while your words yesterday were unintentional, they have made me aware of possibilities I had not considered before." The air between them seemed to charge with potential energy. Lyra found herself holding her breath as Nix-Ray continued. "Our cultures are different. Our worlds, our customs, even our physical forms. But perhaps." Nix-Ray's antenna swayed gently, her scales shifting through subtle shades of violet and blue. Perhaps there is harmony to be found in those differences. Before Lyra could respond, her translator tablet chimed with an urgent message: an emergency diplomatic session had been called. Reality crashed back in, reminding them both of their professional duties and positions. "I should go," Nixray said, rising gracefully. "But perhaps, we could continue this discussion another time." "I'd like that," Lyra replied, her voice soft but certain. As they parted ways at the garden's entrance, Nixray turned back briefly. "Shulveth nxora me," she whispered, deliberately this time, her scales glowing with a brilliant violet hue before she disappeared into the elevator. This time, Lyra understood exactly what she meant, and her heart beat faster in response. She stood there for a long moment, surrounded by the gentle glow of alien flowers, realizing that some cultural misunderstandings could lead to the most unexpected and wonderful discoveries. Over the next few weeks, Lyra and Nixray developed a delicate dance of seemingly casual encounters. Their shared tea sessions in the botanical garden became a regular occurrence, always under the pretense of cultural exchange and language studies. But with each meeting, the space between them grew smaller, their conversations deeper. Today, they sat in their usual spot among the Shalora blooms, their shoulders nearly touching as Lyra showed Nixray an ancient book of earth poetry she had brought from home. The Meridian's antenna swayed with interest as her 4 fingers traced the printed words carefully. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways," Nixray read aloud, her melodic voice giving the familiar words new beauty. "Your English has such fascinating patterns of rhythm. Though I confess, some of these metaphors escape me." Lyra smiled, trying to ignore how the proximity of Nixray's scales, shifting through subtle shades of blue and violet, made her pulse quicken. "Which ones?" "I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach," Nixray quoted. "How does one measure a soul's dimensions?" "It's more about feeling than literal measurement," Lyra explained, unconsciously leaning closer. "The poet is trying to express something boundless, infinite." She paused, gathering her courage. "Like how some emotions defy translation, no matter how many languages you know." Nixray's scales rippled with a deep violet hue that Lyra had come to recognize as emotional intensity. "Yes," she whispered. "Some feelings transcend words entirely." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to crystallize with possibility. Nixray's antenna curved forward slightly, almost brushing Lyra's cheek. The touch would have crossed a dozen diplomatic protocols, but in that moment, neither of them seemed to care. A group of junior diplomats entering the garden shattered the moment. Lyra and Nixray moved apart smoothly, their movements practiced from similar interruptions. To any observer, they appeared to be nothing more than a linguistic specialist and a diplomat reviewing cultural materials. "Perhaps," Nixray said carefully, her scales settling back to their normal pearlescent shade, "we should continue our discussion somewhere more private. My quarters have an excellent view of the sunset over the city." Lyra's heart thundered in her chest. Private meetings in personal quarters were strictly regulated between species to prevent diplomatic incidents. But after weeks of stolen moments and hidden meanings, the prospect of genuine privacy was intoxicating. "I'd like that," she replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "To better understand the nuances of Meridian poetry, of course." "Of course," Nixray agreed, her antenna twitching with barely concealed amusement. "Shall we say 1900 hours? I believe you know the diplomatic residence level." Later that evening, Lyra stood before the door to Nixray's quarters, her hand hovering over the chime. She had changed from her standard uniform into a flowing blue dress that reminded her of Meridian formal wear, hoping the gesture would be appreciated. The door slid open before she could press the chime, revealing Nixray in traditional Meridian evening attire, crystalline patterns adorning her scales in a way that caught and reflected light like captured stars. The sight left Lyra momentarily speechless. "You look beautiful," they both said simultaneously, then laughed, breaking the tension. Nixray's quarters were a stunning blend of Meridian and Earth aesthetics. Crystal formations grew from the walls, their patterns shifting slowly, while earth plants dotted the space in elegant arrangements. The promised sunset painted the sky in shades of purple and gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Would you like some tea?" Nyx-Ray asked, moving to her kitchen area. "I've been experimenting with blending meridian and earth varieties." "I'd love some," Lyra replied, following her. In the kitchen, their movements became a careful choreography of near touches and shared glances. When their fingers brushed as Nyx-Ray handed her a cup, neither pulled away immediately. They settled on a low couch near the windows, closer than they'd ever dared to sit in public. The tea tasted of jasmine and something exotic that reminded Lyra of the Shalora blooms. "I've been studying more of your poetry," Nyx-Ray said softly, her scales shifting through gentle waves of color. "There's one phrase that particularly moved me." She spoke in careful meridian, words that made Lyra's breath catch as she translated them in her mind. "That's from the ancient love poems of the First Dynasty," Lyra whispered. "It speaks of two stars orbiting each other, drawn together by forces they can't resist." "Yes," Nyx-Ray's voice was equally soft. "Like gravity. Like destiny." Her antenna swayed forward, this time deliberately brushing against Lyra's cheek. The touch sent shivers down Lyra's spine. "Nyx-Ray," Lyra breathed, turning to face her fully. "We should probably discuss the diplomatic implications of—" "No more diplomatic implications," Nyx-Ray interrupted gently. "No more hidden meanings or careful translations. Just this." Her scales glowed with that deep, beautiful violet as she leaned closer. "Just us." As the sunset painted the room in ethereal colors, Lyra closed the remaining distance between them. Their first kiss was soft, experimental, the meeting of two worlds, two species, two hearts that had found their shared rhythm across the vast expanse of space. When they finally parted, Nyx-Ray's scales were shimmering with colors Lyra had never seen before. "Shulveth nx orame," Lyra whispered against her lips, meaning every word this time. Nyx-Ray's answering smile was brighter than any star. "Finally," she said, "a perfect translation." News of Lyra and Nyx-Ray's relationship spread through the stellar relations complex like a quantum ripple. It began with subtle whispers, a junior diplomat who noticed them leaving Nyx-Ray's quarters, a maintenance worker who spotted them holding hands in a supposedly empty corridor. The morning after their first kiss, Lyra was summoned to Director Thaddeus Walsh's office. The stern-faced man sat behind his desk, a holographic display of protocol violations floating between them. "Ms. Winters," he began, his voice carefully neutral, "you understand the delicate nature of our work here." "I do, Director," Lyra replied, keeping her voice steady. "My relationship with Ambassador Nyx-Ray doesn't compromise." "Your relationship," he interrupted, "is unprecedented. We have no protocols for romantic attachments between linguistic specialists and diplomatic representatives. The potential for misunderstandings." "With all due respect," Lyra cut in, "preventing misunderstandings is exactly what I do. Nyx-Ray and I." A soft chime announced another arrival. The door slid open to reveal Nyx-Ray herself, her scales a determined silver blue. "Director Walsh," she said, entering without invitation. "I believe I should be part of this discussion." The director's expression tightened. "Ambassador Nyx-Ray, this is an internal matter." "This matter concerns both our peoples," Nyx-Ray stated, moving to stand beside Lyra. Her antennae were straight and proud. "On my world, unions between different species are celebrated as bridges between cultures. They strengthen diplomatic ties, not weaken them." "This isn't Meridian," Walsh replied. "Earth protocols are outdated," came another voice. First Ambassador Jenna Patel stood in the doorway, her dark eyes sharp. "I've reviewed Ms. Winter's work since her relationship with Ambassador Nyx-Ray began. Her translations have improved by 23%. Their cultural exchange programs have doubled in efficiency." Lyra felt Nyx-Ray's hand slip into hers, their fingers intertwining naturally despite their different numbers. Her scales rippled with subtle patterns of support and defiance. "Furthermore, Patel continued, the Meridian Council has expressed interest in expanding our exchange programs, citing the success of their representatives' deep cultural integration. She smiled slightly. It seems love makes excellent diplomacy. Walsh's expression cycled through several emotions before settling on resignation. There will need to be guidelines, he said finally. Protocols for future cases. We would be honored to help develop them, Nix-Ray replied diplomatically, though Lyra could feel her joy through their joined hands. Together, Lyra added, squeezing Nix-Ray's fingers gently. Later that evening, they celebrated in their spot in the botanical garden. The Shalora blooms seemed to glow brighter around them, responding to Nix-Ray's radiantly shifting scales. I thought I was going to lose my position, Lyra admitted, leaning against Nix-Ray's shoulder. I would have resigned first, Nix-Ray replied, her antenna brushing Lyra's cheek affectionately. Though I'm glad it didn't come to that. Ambassador Patel's intervention was unexpected. She told me later that she's been watching us, Lyra said. Apparently, we've inspired several other interspecies couples to be more open about their relationships. Nix-Ray's scales flickered with pleasure. On my world, there's an ancient saying, love births new stars in the darkness between worlds. That's beautiful, Lyra murmured. Though I'm pretty sure you're making that up. Nix-Ray's laugh was like chimes in the wind. Perhaps. But it should be a saying. Her expression grew more serious. The coming days won't be easy. Many will question us, challenge us. Let them, Lyra replied, turning to face her love. We'll show them what's possible when hearts align across the stars. Nix-Ray's scales blazed with that beautiful violet that Lyra now knew meant pure joy. Shulveth nxora me, she whispered. Forever, Lyra replied in Meridian, the word shimmering between them like a promise. 1 year after their first tea session in the botanical garden, Lyra stood before a mirror in her quarters, adjusting the crystalline patterns that adorned her formal dress. The designs, a gift from Nix-Ray's family, caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across her skin. You're wearing them perfectly, Nix-Ray said from the doorway, her own scales shimmering with patterns that matched Lyra's dress. My mother will be pleased. Today marked the first official Meridian human cultural integration ceremony, inspired by their relationship. Delegates from both worlds would witness their formal union, establishing a precedent for future interspecies partnerships. I'm nervous, Lyra admitted, turning to face her beloved. What if I mispronounce something in the ceremony? Your entire family will be watching. Nix-Ray crossed the room in fluid steps, her antenna reaching out to brush Lyra's cheek in their private gesture of affection. You speak Meridian better than some of my cousins now. Besides, they already love you. Mother hasn't stopped talking about how you quoted ancient poetry during your first meeting. The memory made Lyra smile. She had spent weeks preparing for that video call, determined to impress Nix-Ray's family. The look of pride on Nix-Ray's face when she recited the traditional greeting poems had been worth every hour of practice. A soft chime reminded them it was time. They made their way to the complex's grand hall, which had been transformed for the occasion. Shalora blooms from Meridian twined with earth roses, their combined glow creating an ethereal atmosphere. Delegates from both worlds filled the seats, their quiet conversations a blend of multiple languages. Director Walsh himself stood at the front, looking far more relaxed than he had a year ago. Beside him, Ambassador Patel beamed with obvious pride. In the front row, Nix-Ray's family sat in their formal regalia, their scales shifting in synchronized patterns of joy. As they walked down the aisle together, Lyra saw more than a few other interspecies couples in the audience, their joined hands and loving glances a testament to the changes their love had inspired. The new protocols she and Nix-Ray had helped develop had opened doors for others to follow their hearts across the stars. The ceremony blended traditions from both worlds. They exchanged vows in 3 languages, Standard English, Meridian, and the new hybrid dialect that had evolved among diplomatic couples. When Lyra spoke the ancient Meridian binding words, her pronunciation was flawless, bringing happy tears to her soon-to-be mother-in-law's eyes. With these words, we bridge not just two hearts, but two worlds, Nyxray said, her scales glowing with that deep violet that had first captured Lyra's heart. You are my star's alignment, my soul's translation. In every language, across every world, Lyra replied, her voice thick with emotion, my heart beats in rhythm with yours. She spoke the next words in perfect meridian, Sholveth en exora me eternum. Their kiss sealed the ceremony, and the hall erupted in applause. The Shalora blooms pulsed with light, responding to Nyxray's radiantly shifting scales. As they turned to face their guests, Lyra caught sight of a young human diplomat holding hands with a Centaurian ambassador, their eyes full of hope and possibility. At the reception, they danced to music that blended earth and meridian harmonies. Nyxray's family taught Lyra traditional dance steps while she showed them Earth's waltz, creating a beautiful fusion of styles that soon had others joining in. Look what we started, Lyra murmured as they swayed together, her head resting against Nyxray's shoulder. We started nothing, Nyxray replied softly. Love like this has always existed among the stars. We simply helped others see it was possible. Later that night, they stood on their private balcony, watching the city lights mirror the stars above. Nyxray's scales had settled into a peaceful pattern that Lyra now recognized as pure contentment. Do you remember that first day in the cafeteria? Lyra asked, smiling at the memory. When I accidentally proposed to you over lunch. Nyxray's antenna twitched with amusement. I nearly dropped my food. I couldn't believe a human had learned that phrase, let alone used it so innocently. Not so innocent now, Lyra teased, leaning in to kiss her wife's cheek. I meant every word today. I know, Nyxray replied, pulling her closer. In every language, in every world, in every universe, my heart beats in rhythm with yours. Above them, the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if celebrating this small victory in the grand dance of universal love. Their story had become more than just their own, it was now a beacon for others, a reminder that love truly knew no boundaries, not even those between the stars. In the garden below, the Shalora blooms continued their gentle glow, a perfect blend of two worlds, just like the two hearts beating in sync on the balcony above.